to bring the lost to Jesus for membership in his family, to develop them into Christ-like maturity, to equip them for Christ's ministry on earth, to improve their quality of life, to be a ministry to the total man. To both the Old Testament and the New. We're going to, while I was sitting in the pulpit, my message didn't change, but I want to sort of stay with the spirit that we had on last Sunday. It was a service of deliverance. Help me say, a service of deliverance. It was surrounded and rooted in what I call faith. And what I call faith. So I want to take you to two passages. We're going to Romans chapter 14 and verses 20 and 21. Romans chapter 4. Then we will go to the book of the beginnings, which is Genesis chapter 22. And there we will look at verses 6 and 7 and 8 in that order. Let's look at the New Testament first. Verse 20 reads like this: He staggered not at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strong in faith, giving glory to God, and being fully persuaded that what he had promised, he was able also to perform. Let's back up into the book of Genesis. In Genesis chapter 22, verse 6, and Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide. Will you repeat after me? Say, God will provide. God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. I want to talk from this subject this afternoon. God will provide. Will you talk back to me and say, if you hang in here and don't quit, God will provide. Certainly, our message is built on the life of the patriarch Abraham. Abraham is described as the father of faith. He introduces to us not salvation, because salvation really did not come until God sent Moses to write about the law. The question came to Paul in the 7th chapter of Romans and verse 7, and he comes on to say, I would not have known what righteousness was had it not been for the law. But the law gives to us the mind of God, God's standard of how he wants man to live. But God chose Abraham to introduce to us something called faith. Now, faith, what is that? Because faith is the foundation, it is the avenue that we have to travel if we want to reach God. Faith is a firm belief in something for which there is no proof, or a belief and trust in God and his word. Faith is what God uses to produce miracles. For without faith, it is impossible to please God. Jesus, in the 13th chapter of Matthew, he returns back to his hometown of Nazareth. While he was there in Nazareth, the Bible tells us he began to teach. And while he was teaching, the people became upset with him. They didn't become upset because of his doctrine, but many of them said, how in the world does he come with all of this knowledge? Where does he get all of this understanding, and he's never been schooled? They said, now don't we know him? We know of his father, the carpenter. We know of his mother, Mary. We know of all of his brothers and all of his sisters. And the Bible said they became offended in him. And in the very last verse, which is verse 58 of that 13th chapter, it says he did not many mighty works there because of their unbelief. Even though he wanted to help them, even though he was giving them truth, and even though he was giving them information that would stabilize their life, they were not able to accept it because they felt like he was the wrong person at the wrong time. Faith, saints of God, is not common sense. And one cannot understand God or the things of God through your human intellect. This is why people find it so hard to live for God, because you can't rationalize him. Second problem you got, you can't see him with your eyes. You have to thoroughly trust him by faith. Paul tells us to the Corinthian church in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 18. He says, for the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness. Help me say foolishness. But unto us which are saved, it is the power of God. God has chosen the foolish things of the world in order to use to bring us to him and work for our lives. Foolishness is what he chooses. Human beings describe it as foolishness. Foolishness such as prayer. Prayer, something anybody can do. All you have to do is humble yourself and pray. Second of all, fasting. Fasting is something that anybody can do. You don't need any money. You don't need a lot of training. You don't need a lot of education. then help me say sacrifice. God turns around and uses sacrifice, giving, as one of the tools in order to work with. Then there is another one called righteousness. Help me say righteousness. Righteousness, the Bible tells us that righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Something about right doing, practice right doing. Matthew 6:33 says, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things, help me say things. Otherwise, we want things, we need things. But he is saying if you practice right doing, it's going to trigger good things. It will trigger clothing. He talks in that 6th chapter about the lilies of the field. That tells us that they don't sow. They don't have to work for their beauty. All they do is just grow, and God beautifies them. God is saying all we have to do is trust him. If we trust him, if we learn to lean on his word, follow his principles, then all these things that you desire, all the things that you dream of, all of the things that you're requesting, he is saying, I will see that you get it. Help me say, first things first. We got to learn how to prioritize, learn how to put God first, because if we put him first, he's saying, I will take care of you. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 25 goes on to say, because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. Otherwise, the things that men call foolishness, the things that men call weakness, God says it's stronger than what men can do. Paul goes on to tell us in 1 Corinthians 1 and verse 26, he says, for ye see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise men after the flesh, otherwise not many mighty, not many noble are called. He's telling you, you'll notice that I don't call the brilliant one. I'm not calling the prudent one. I'm not calling the intellect. He said, not many of them are called. So the question is, why, God, are you not calling the prudent? Why are you not calling the intellectual? Why are you not calling these kind? Because they tend to put their trust in facts. They put their trust in the textbook. Y'all don't hear me. They put their trust in the minds of men. So he says, you see, brethren, that I don't call many mighty. I'm not calling the big shot. I'm not calling the noble. He says they're not called. But notice what Jesus says in Matthew. Y'all so quiet on me. Listen to Matthew chapter 11 and verse 25. The Bible says, at that time Jesus answered and said, I thank thee, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because thou hid these things from the wise and from the prudent, and hath revealed them unto babes. Otherwise, God is saying, if you really want to connect with me, if you really want good results, you got to think like a babe. Otherwise, Ain't no grown folks in Jesus. We got to learn how to trust him like a baby trusts his father. In that 18th chapter of Matthew, he says, except ye come like this little child, you shall in no wise enter in. So God is looking for those of us that are willing to lean on his word. Learning to lean on Jesus. Finding more power than I have ever seen. I'm learning to do what? Lean on the Lord. It's like God, saints. It's like God has a sense of humor. Like the way he's designed this thing, he has a serious sense of humor because he reverses the whole program. He's chosen to use the weak things of the world, things that are simple, things that anybody can do. Can I talk to you? Such as prayer, simple things, such as fasting, simple things. Giving are the weapons of the believer, that if we learn how to use these simple things. Let me take you back to the Old Testament, to 1 King, the story of Naaman. Naaman was a man that had leprosy, and Naaman was a great warrior. And when Elijah came to speak to him for his healing, he had this disease called leprosy, and nothing could help him. No human being could help Naaman. But a young girl said, oh, if Master Naaman could go down and visit that preacher, God will heal him of his leprosy. And Naaman went down. But when he went down, he was angry and upset because the thing the preacher told him to do was simple. It was something that anybody could have done. He said, I want you to go down to the Jordan River, and I want you to dip yourself 7 times. And I want you to dip yourself. If you do it 7 times, your flesh will come back to you, and you shall be clean. But when Naaman heard that, the Bible said Naaman got angry. He got wrought. And when he got mad, he said, I thought sure that this preacher would have come out and told me to do some great thing. But his servant told him, he said, Naaman, if he had told you to do some big thing that most folks couldn't do, wouldn't you have done it? But he told you to do a simple thing. Help me say a simple thing. That's all God is asking for me and you to do. I'm thanking God that my salvation don't come because I got millions of dollars. I thank God my salvation don't come because I own millions of property. My salvation comes from a simple thing. Help me say simple thing. It comes because I believe simply that Jesus died and that he rose again. I believe it so strong and believe it so much until it has transformed my life. I'm able to come without money. I'm able to come without price. I can come just as I am. Will y'all help me say a simple thing? If it had been a big thing, many of us would have been lost. But I've got freedom today. I've got joy today. I've got victory today because of a simple thing. Help me say a simple thing, which is called faith in Jesus Christ. Will you help me say, Lord, increase my faith? 1 Corinthians 1 verse 27 says, but God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty, and base things of the world and things which are despised. He's got a sense of humor. He chooses things that folks don't like. God has chosen, yea, and those things which are not, to bring to naught the things that are. You want to go up? God says, then if you want to go to the top, you got to come down. If you will humble yourself, I will exalt you. He reverses that thing. Can I talk to you this afternoon? Listen to Peter. Peter writes in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 6. He says, humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, and he will exalt you in due season. You don't have to push yourself. You don't have to brag about yourself. All you got to do is just live for God. And if you live for God, God will get in your business. That's why he says, in all thy ways, if you acknowledge me, I'm going to direct you. I will help you make good decisions for your life. But I got to go down if I want to go up. Tell your neighbor, say, you got to go down if you want to go up. I'm hearing him now in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 38. He says, ye have heard that it is said that you would hate your enemy. It is said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. God reverses this thing. He turns it upside down. He has a sense of humor in order to get you to trust him and forget about what you've learned in the world. It's been said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemy. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that despitefully use you and persecute you. Why, God, do you reverse this thing like that? He reverses it according to verse 29 of Corinthians when he says that no flesh. Oh, y'all ain't saying nothing to me. He's saying that I don't want no flesh. When I bless you and when I lift you, when I deliver you, you won't be able to say it's because of my education. You won't be able to say it's because of my doctor's degree. You can't say it's because of my master's degree. You'll have to say, look what the Lord has done. And it's marvelous in my eyes. Will you help me say, Lord, increase my faith? Yes, faith is not common sense. There was the old prophet Elisha. Elisha had a school of the prophets. And there in the school of the prophets, he would train young men in the school of prophecy. But there was one of the young prophets who had died. And when he died, he left his widow with 2 sons. And when the man died, the Bible said he died broke. And when he died broke, his widow didn't have no Social Security. Are y'all with me? There was no state plans in order to undergird her. All she had was nothing. So she came to Elisha and she said, oh, Elisha, my husband has died and my husband has left me penniless. I don't have nothing, and the debtors have come now to take my 2 sons, and they want to make them bond slaves in order to pay off the debt that their daddy left. And I need you, oh prophet, to help me out of my trouble. I want to tell you, saints of God, I don't care whether it's a financial situation. Don't care whether it's a physical situation. Don't care whether it's an emotional situation. The God I serve is able to make the impossible possible. How many of y'all believe that today? That God is still the same God yesterday, today, and forevermore. So Elisha said, woman, I want to know, what do you have? God always gives us something. You may feel you ain't got nothing, but he will leave you with something. No matter how small your something is, you got something. Will y'all help me teach my lesson? Tell your neighbor, say, neighbor, you may think you ain't got nothing, but God will always leave you with something. And all she said, oh preacher, all I have is just a little bottle of oil. He said, well, this is what I'm going to do. I want you to go and borrow all of the vessels you can. Go get all the vessels you can find. And then I want you to take them vessels and bring them back home. And you take everything you have and shut it up. And I want you to shut it up in your house with your son. And when you shut it up, I want you to take one little bit you got and take them and start pouring the oil. And if you pour the oil, I will get in the oil, and I will take nothing and make something out of it. This is what God did. God got in the oil, and she started pouring. And the more she poured, the more oil came and filled up all of the vessels she borrowed. You may think you don't have nothing, but you got God on the inside. And all you've got to do is learn how to wake up the Jesus in you.
Count on Malone Media Productions for all your professional video needs. Services include sports filming and editing, professional documentaries and presentations, promotional videos and infomercials, job fair and recruitment videos, video consultation and training, portrait videos for all your precious moments, church and business commercials, as well as 4-camera wedding and event filming. Contact Cottrell Malone of Malone Media Productions for a free promotional DVD and quote.